In February, at a memorial for the late Queen, 2 velvet chairs sat empty. Nobody came to fill them. 2 small cards rested on the cushions, handwritten. Each one carried the name of a child, and those children were 5,000 miles away in the California sun with no idea that their absence was being measured to the inch. Hold that picture for me. 2 empty chairs, because 4 months later, a cream-coloured envelope sealed with red wax would close this whole story in silence, and we will get there, I promise you. But you have to walk the road with me first. If you have followed this family as long as I have, stay with me on this channel. We sit with the whole story here, not just the headlines somebody shouts on a Tuesday morning then forgets by lunch. Now look, to understand 2 cold chairs at Windsor, you cannot start in February. You have to go back. All the way back to a woman who was loved by millions and managed by a handful of men in grey suits who never once understood why. You remember her? Of course you do. You did not read about Diana in a book, you watched her. You watched the wedding in 1981, the shy glance, the long white train that seemed to go on forever. And then you watched year after year what the institution did to her after the cameras went home. She humanized that family. She held the hands no royal had ever held. She knelt down to the level of sick children and looked them in the eye. And for that warmth, the machine treated her as a problem to be solved. Here's the part most people rush past. The same institution that could not find room for Diana while she was alive learned very fast how to use the idea of her once she was gone. Her warmth became a brand, her memory became useful, and the woman herself was filed away. If you watch that funeral in the autumn of 1997, you remember the coffin moving through the silence. You remember the small white card resting on the flowers. One word on it, mummy. I do not have to describe it, it is already in your chest. It was the very end of August that year. A tunnel in Paris. A car that was going too fast. She was 36 years old and she did not come home. 2 boys woke up the next morning without a mother, and the whole world watched them learn how to stand up straight in front of strangers. And one of those boys was only 15. He walked behind his mother's coffin in front of the entire planet, and he was not allowed to break. The only sound, people say, was hooves on stone and a nation holding its breath. A child grieving in the worst possible privacy, which is to say, none at all. Remember that boy. Burn him into your memory for the next half hour, because he is the quiet center of everything that happened this year, even when his name is nowhere near the headline. There is a story the people who worked near Diana still tell, quietly, when they think the cameras are off. Late one evening, after a long day of handlers and flashbulbs, she sat alone in a corridor outside her own apartments. No staff, no smile saved up for anyone. She just sat there, in the half dark, with her shoes in her hand and her back against the cold wall. A woman the entire world wanted, and not one room in that whole building that felt like hers. That is the wound. It was never really a scandal. It was a loneliness. It was the slow discovery that blood made you royal, but blood never once made you safe inside those walls. Now, obviously, none of us was sitting in that corridor, and a great deal of what gets passed around about Diana has softened into legend over 28 years. But what is documented is the public record of how that marriage ended, and you lived through every single chapter of it in real time the way the rest of us did. So when the institution finally moved this year, understand that it did not move in a vacuum. It moved with 28 years of unfinished business sitting in the room. And the man holding the pen, the man this whole story actually belongs to, was the boy who once walked behind that coffin. Because in June, that boy, a man now, 43 now, second in line now, would stand quietly behind a decision that no modern monarch had dared to make. They edited the line of succession itself. And to understand why, you have to understand what he has been building very patiently for a very long time. Now here is where this stops being grief and starts becoming a plan. The boy of 15 is a grown man. And the people around him will tell you the same thing in different words over and over. He does not raise his voice, he does not slam doors, he does not feud in the press, he waits. He watches the same institution that surrounded his mother, and he has spent his entire adult life deciding, slowly, what kind of crown he intends to hand to the children who come after him. And somewhere inside him, I genuinely believe, there are two images that never leave. A mother made to feel like an outsider in her own family, and this year, two empty chairs at Windsor with two children's name cards resting on them. The same coldness 1 generation later, wearing a different suit. But his answer was not anger. Honestly, that is the thing people get wrong about him. His answer was a rule, a monarchy of presence, not proximity, duty over celebrity. If you want to carry the weight of the crown, you stand on British soil and you do the actual work. Blood alone is not a ticket, it never was supposed to be. And when he needed someone with no softness left to give, he turned to his aunt. Princess Anne had known this family's patterns long before Diana ever did. She had lived a quieter version of one herself back in the early 70s before Camilla married the man Anne once stood beside. Anne does not negotiate, Anne does not soothe, Anne executes. The plan had a shape, and the shape started with those chairs. People inside call it very quietly the presence test. Place 2 empty seats at the most sacred service of the year, put the children's name cards on the cushions, then simply let the cameras record what everyone in the country already privately knew. For 2 full hours, those chairs stayed cold. And here is the thing about cold chairs on film. They are not gossip. They are not a rumour you can deny. They are evidence sitting in plain sight in front of the whole world. After the service, a file began to move quietly through the Cabinet Office. Call it the continuity file. 2 numbers sat at the very top of it, and the numbers did all the talking. The first number was 5,000. That is the distance in miles between those 2 children and the country they were born to one day represent. The second number was 0. That is the count of hours those children had spent in royal service since the family packed up and left. The Queen had died in the September of 2022, and the coronation came the following May in 2023. In that handover, the institution had already proven one cold thing to itself. It could move on from absolutely anyone, no matter how beloved. And so it allowed itself to ask a colder question still. Can you truly inherit a nation from 5,000 miles away? A senior advisor reportedly put it to the king in private, in words very close to these. A title without presence is a souvenir, and the crown, he is said to have added, is not in the business of manufacturing souvenirs. And the king, by every account, did not argue. Because here is the single line the whole year turns on. A crown is a public trust. It is not a family heirloom you mail across an ocean. Now, we cannot say that briefing happened word for word. These private conversations never make it onto paper, and that is rather the entire point of them. But the direction of travel was about to become impossible for anyone to deny. And the next part is the detail most channels skipped right over, because it does not fit a tidy headline. Because the people 5,000 miles away had finally understood exactly what was being built. And they decided they would not go quietly. They decided to fight. Now here is where ordinary family tension curdles into something a lot closer to war. Inside the offices in California, between the late spring and the early summer, the temperature rose very fast. According to people who described those weeks, the reaction inside that house split clean in 2. One half was shock, the other half was strategy. The shock, insiders say, belonged to Harry. And the strategy, they say, belonged to the woman sitting beside him. A 14-page document was prepared, not a statement written to inform, a press release written to wound. It accused the monarchy of cruelty toward 2 innocent children, and it was built, page by page, to detonate the moment it was released. You have to understand what was actually on the table for them. A brand reportedly valued in the hundreds of millions, and almost every single penny of it anchored to one thing and one thing only. Proximity to the throne. Every deal, every contract, every stage they ever stood on traces back to a bloodline. Take the children's place in the line of succession away, and the word royal in their whole story starts to echo a little hollow. And Harry, here is the part that keeps this from ever being simple, the part I refuse to flatten. He is still her son, he is still that boy. People close to that house say he went quiet for long stretches in those weeks, that he turned to his wife at one point and admitted, almost in a whisper, that he never truly believed his father would go through with it. The boy who lost his mother to the machine was now watching the machine quietly close a door on his own children. You do not have to agree with one single choice he made to feel the weight of that. In April, a black car came up through the Windsor gates under a full media blackout. One passenger inside. 5 days of talks that were meant to save his children's future, behind walls that do not leak cleanly. But what he found waiting for him was not a father, it was a sovereign. Charles reportedly told him, in one form of words or another, that the crown has no heart, that it has only a duty to the people who pay for it. A family can be private, he is said to have told his son, but a monarchy is a public trust, and those who choose not to serve it cannot expect to be carried forever by it. Then the king did something that, insiders say, sent a chill straight through the room. He stood up and he handed a thick leather folder to his sister. The Windsor Memorandum, they call it now, roughly 150 pages built over the better part of a year by the institution's own lawyers, written specifically to quietly close every single loophole the California side had been hoping to slip through. And Anne did not arrive at that table to talk. She arrived to read out a sentence. The final detail was the sharpest cut of all. From that day forward, every request concerning the children, security, travel, titles, anything at all, would no longer go to the king. It would go to the office of the Princess of Wales. To reach his own father, Harry would now have to go through Catherine. The insider, not the outsider, suddenly held the only door. And there is one image from those 5 days I genuinely cannot get out of my head. Just before 9 in the morning, on the day he arrived, that black car rolled to a stop inside the gates. The door opened and a single man stepped out onto the gravel, alone with no one walking forward to greet him. He stood there for a moment in the half light, in the place where he had grown up. He had come home as a son. The building received him as a visitor. Now look, we cannot independently confirm every line that passed between a father and a son behind those particular walls. Those rooms, as I said, do not leak cleanly, but what is fully documented is what came next, out in the open for the entire country to watch happen. And the record speaks plainly enough, because the plan was finished. And in June, it was signed. In the middle of June, inside the sovereign's room at the palace, the king held a gold-nibbed pen over a heavy sheet of parchment. This was not ceremony. This was constitutional. And with a single signature, the children of the Sussexes were removed from the line of succession. Clinically, legally, with 1,000 years of authority sitting behind the stroke of one pen. The encrypted message reached California within minutes, and the room there, by every account, simply went silent. The birthright of 2 children had just been edited out of the official record, the way you would delete a line from a letter. Now follow the clock with me very closely, because the entire last act of this story runs on the hour. At Adelaide Cottage, the Princess of Wales was watching a different clock. She was watching the California news cycle. She knew to the hour that a 14-page document was sitting on a monitor 3,000 miles away, one single finger from the send button. So she did something that her own advisors, her own communications team, did not see coming. She picked up a secure phone and she dialed Harry directly. No staff, no middleman, just the number. The call connected at midnight, London time. It lasted exactly 10 minutes. No lawyers on the line, no publicists listening in. A mother and the brother she'd known since he was a boy in short trousers. And here is the scene. The whole story had been quietly building toward this entire time. Just past midnight, in a dark media room in California, that 14-page release glowed on the screen. The send button sat there waiting, and Harry sat with the phone pressed against his ear, completely still, while Catherine talked. She did not defend the decree. Insiders say she did something far colder and far more effective than any defence. She asked him to picture the 2 children at 25 years old, sitting alone, typing their own names into a search engine. And then she asked him, very simply, what he wanted the very first result to be: a father's love, or a 14-page declaration of war written by his own hand. You are not protecting them, she reportedly told him, somewhere in those 10 minutes. You are documenting their pain for strangers to read forever. Now, we genuinely cannot say those were her exact words. That call had 2 people on it, and neither one has ever read it back to us. But within those 10 minutes, the screen went dark, the release was shelved, and the button, against every expectation, was never once pressed. And this is the echo I cannot stop hearing, the one that ties this whole year together. 28 years ago, a boy of 15 was made to walk his grief in public on live television because the institution decided the cameras mattered more than the child did. This year, that same family had the chance to do it again, to turn 2 more children into public property, into headlines, into ammunition, and the boy who once walked behind that coffin made absolutely certain that it did not happen a second time. When the decree finally leaked and the press surrounded William outside a public engagement, one reporter shouted the cruelest version of the question: was this a betrayal of his own blood? William did not flinch, he did not look away, he looked straight at the cameras and he gave them 5 words. They will always be family. 5 words that did something close to impossible. They separated the family from the firm in a single breath. Love them as relatives, just never ever feed them to the machine. The empty chairs at Windsor were never an act of cruelty. They were a line being drawn in the gravel so that no child in this family would ever again be raised as a bargaining chip. And the public agreed, fast. On the 27th of June at 6 in the morning, the bundles of newspapers hit the stands at Victoria Station. 3 words ran across every front page in heavy black ink: the names removed. By 8, the broadcasts were cutting in every 15 minutes. By the end of that week, a snap poll put approval for the King's decision at 82%. The country, exhausted by years of a transatlantic war it never asked for, had quietly chosen the disciplined Crown. In California, that one number landed like a verdict, read aloud. They had gambled everything they had on public sympathy, and the public, it turned out, had already moved on without them. As for the old rivalry that started all of this so many years ago, the woman who once stood in the place where Diana should have stood, even she could read the room now. The argument she won in 2005, the year of that quiet second wedding, was being slowly, permanently lost to a memory she could never outlive. Diana lost the marriage, and honestly, she is winning the century. And Anne, insiders say, left Harry with one last sentence at Windsor before he flew home, worded close to this: a title is a loan from the state. The state has called it in. No softness, no door left standing open. Just the cold arithmetic of an institution that had finally decided to stop apologising. He could not save his mother. He could still spare these children. That, in the end, is the whole of it. And then, just when the story looked completely finished, the cold king did the single thing that nobody had scripted. In July, a car with diplomatic plates came slowly up the drive in California. Inside a secured pouch was a single cream-coloured envelope sealed with the crimson wax of the sovereign's private crest. A handwritten letter, not addressed to Harry, not addressed to Meghan, addressed to the 2 children. With one quiet instruction attached: it was to be opened only when they were old enough to decide, entirely for themselves, what Britain would ever mean to them. Now, remember the envelope I asked you to hold in your hand at the very beginning. Here it is, and here is the twist that I did not see coming. Harry, the same man who had been one button away from open war, received that letter in total silence. He did not hand it to a lawyer. He did not read it out on camera. He walked to a single locked cabinet in his study and he placed the envelope inside and he turned the key. The boy who lost his mother to the machine refused in that one moment to feed his children to it. Now, none of this has been confirmed from inside that house, and a sealed letter is, by its very nature, a story that no one alive can yet read. But the gesture, if it happened the way it is told, says almost everything that needs saying. Some things are too sacred for a press release, and he, of all people, knows exactly why. The 2 empty chairs at Windsor were never really about 2 children at all. They were about a family that finally decided blood is not a leash and presence is not a privilege you can phone in from 5,000 miles away. The chairs stayed empty on purpose, and the man who let them stay empty did it in the end, for the very same reason his mother once knelt down to sick children, because he knows better than anyone left alive exactly what this institution does to the people it forgets to protect. 28 years she was called the difficult one, the outsider, the problem to be managed. And this year, very quietly, without a single shout, her son built a crown that puts the child in front of the camera. That is not revenge. Revenge ends the moment the other person hurts. This does not end. This was built to last. This was a son making certain that the machine which broke his mother never gets to break anyone else the very same way. So tell me down in the comments, where were you the night you first heard there were 3 of them in that marriage? I read every single one of them, I promise you that, because you did not learn this story from a documentary. You lived it hour by hour, and you, more than anyone else watching, deserve to see how it finally ends. 2 empty chairs, 1 locked envelope, and a boy who once walked behind a coffin finally writing the ending himself.